Okay, welcome to the Ad Agility Podcast with Dan and
Phil.
Hey. We're back again, and we've started looking into waste, and we've already done one episode on waste, but we're going to continue that theme. And we're going to continue that theme with reference to the 7 forms of waste that are defined in Lean.
Yes. We went a bit off piece last time and looked at something that was probably quite close to our hearts.
Yeah, it was good off piece. Oh, good to go off piece.
It is. Yeah. It is. And I feel with the wastes of Lean, they were very much created with a manufacturing lens initially. So sometimes it's nice to look at other things.
Yeah, and they were, because it originally came. It was originally done in manufacturing, right? By Taiichi Ohno with his Toyota production system, and he defined these 7 wastes. Later on, around the turn of the century, I like to say that because it was around the turn of the century. Mary and Tom Popendiak.
Is that how we're saying it?
I think we're saying it like that.
I still don't know. I think I've been saying Popendyke for years.
Well, I don't think it matters really. We'll give you a reference for the book at the end, and you can make up your own way on how to say that. But yeah, they looked at these wastes and they sort of made them real for software development. So we'll just go through those 7 wastes and we talk about how they kind of manifest themselves in software development. We'll just do a quick overview now, because we're actually going to dedicate either an episode to each of these, or we're going to bundle a couple into an episode, depending on how much we have to say about them. It's usually quite a lot, actually.
Yes.
We can just fill the time quite well. But the first one's inventory. And when we talk about inventory, we're just talking about partially done work that's sitting around. Yeah. Unfinished stories, unreleased code, that sort of stuff. So we're going to do an episode on inventory after this one. And I'll just go through the other types of waste. Extra processing. Now, extra processing, it's termed in software as doing unnecessary activities that don't add value to the product. So actually, are things like Pretty PowerPoint, which was our last one, is an example of extra processing when you do it at the design and analysis stage. Make all these lovely slide decks that don't actually add value to your end customer. So extra processing, all the unnecessary stuff that goes on at every stage of that software development lifecycle. We've got overproduction, which is producing unnecessary features.
Yep.
How many of the features of Excel do you use, Phil?
Not many.
Well, this is the thing. So in all software development environments, we're all creating products with lots of features. Some of them don't get used by the customers, and that's overproduction. Transportation. This is handoffs between teams and task switching. A bit of a waste. Motion. This is inefficiency, right? So this translates in software development as inefficiency. It's the stuff that you do manually that's tedious and repetitive that could be automated. We've got defects.
Yep, nice
defects.
Easy one.
Easy one. But, there's some subtleties with that, which we'll go into when we talk about the episode. Today we're doing waiting and delays, which is really waiting for stuff and delays in stuff.
Yeah, of all of the wastes that are there, probably one of the easiest to get your head around.
Is a really easy one to get your head around, and actually, it's a major waste, isn't it? Because if you look through the SDLC, and we're going to do this episode with reference to the software development lifecycle. If you look through the SDLC and you think of the process of going from an idea in somebody's head to a bit of finished production code, well, that whole process. In between each of those stages, there was wait times, and those add up, and they serve to increase the lead times, don't they?
Yes. But probably to start, it might just be good to go over why it's such a problem.
Let's do that.
So the obvious one is, while people are waiting, you're probably still paying them, and it costs money.
It's expensive.
So
waiting is expensive.
It's expensive.
Yep.
Simple as that.
Yep, and it's reducing that lead, and it's actually extending that lead time out, isn't it?
Yes.
Across your idea to live process. So,
yes.
Nobody wants to put in a software request and have to wait a year for it to be delivered.
No.
But that's a common thing in our industry.
Oh, yeah. It really is. It really is.
Probably a year would be, actually some places would, die to achieve that cycle time.
Yeah. And when you're in that kind of environment, it's demotivating as well. If you're actually doing the work, but you know you're going to have to wait for this person and wait for that person, and your stuff's not going to be released for another year.
I agree. It's not fun, and actually, I think if you look at some of those state of DevOps reports, I think they find a strong correlation between developer satisfaction and how quickly they can cycle work through the system.
Yes.
Areas where they've got an efficient process where they're not waiting a lot. People have got much more satisfaction because they can see the end-to-end process go quite quickly rather than it being a massive, tedious...
Yes, the process of waiting and asking for other people's help and waiting for them to get back to you is a bit rubbish. And then not seeing your stuff go through to fruition is a bit rubbish too.
Yeah, and it takes constant management as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's complexity. Yeah.
How many reminder emails can you send before actually losing the will?
I'm quite good at those. But and then the other one I want to mention is busy work. This is the thing I've seen, and it's quite hard to really put your finger on it. But the best example of this is when I joined a team as a Scrum Master, and the project they were going to work on was delayed. But the team was in place. So what did the team do? They didn't sit there and do nothing. They found other things to do. They found little fixes and bits and bobs, generally stuff that actually had a really poor return on investment. Busy work. They tried to get ahead in some of their analysis that perhaps wasn't all used. And it ultimately was a waste of time. But what was worse is they then would take up other people's time and their busy work. So...
Yeah, I need an environment for this. I need an architect to validate this on this work that was kind of pointless in the first place.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Well, nobody wants that.
No. So I think that's why waste is bad. It's not just the cost. There's all these hidden negatives that we don't always think about.
You find there's all crossover between this stuff, isn't there? You look at the inventory part of it, and all that stuff building up into big queues just increases wait times as well. So you see crossover and waste in all aspects of this. Usually when you've got one, you've got in an environment, you've got a load of others because they're all kind of interconnected.
Yes.
Yeah. Should we just dive into waiting and delays?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a couple of categories which I think are going to be one's obvious and one's not so obvious. So the first one is, I think it's quite obvious, waiting for stuff, waiting for information, waiting for decisions, or waiting for resources. That's you can kind of categorize most of the problems in those. But I think there's another aspect that is not waiting.
Go on.
Right. Which in turn creates loads of delays and rework and waiting. So the not waiting bit is making decisions too early that should be deferred till later.
Okay.
So you make an early design decision that when you don't have all the information available, and then you end up just delaying the pipeline further down because you're having to unpick the fallout of an early decision that's being made.
Okay, so that's in the waiting category because there should have been wait time, but actually instead of waiting and having all the negatives we talked about, they just chose not to wait and made the mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm with you.
And then it has the knock-on effect of you having to wait while you unpick that decision.
Yes. No,
So
I have seen that now you mention it.
It seems a bit weird, but I've definitely seen early design decisions, particularly when things end up in the architecture realm, that have proved to be things that have to be unpicked by the developers and then just cause more delays further down the pipeline. So I think what we wanted to do is talk about some different aspects of waiting, and I think we wanted to walk through the software development lifecycle. But before we do that, I think there's some sort of generic kind of scenarios of how waiting manifests itself that are applicable to all of that lifecycle.
Yeah, and actually, so we've structured this throughout the software lifecycle, but a lot of it overlaps and applies to different parts.
Yeah.
It was just a nice way of structuring it.
Yeah. So I think some of those generic problems, they usually stem from, we did that whole podcast series about team structure.
Yeah.
I think those generic problems occur from team structure, and they occur because there's a kind of a negative project mentality within the organisation, and those generic problems manifest themselves as waiting for people to be assigned to do some kind of work across the whole of that life cycle, whether it's analysis, some architecture or development. It's just waiting for the people to be assigned to do any of that work at any stage. And I think that it's such a crossover with the inventory thing, because usually the problem is when people inject loads of work in progress into the system, and then you've got people busy on lots of different things, and you can never get hold of the people to do your thing when you want it done. So the way I captured it and thought about it is whenever you have need of a skill, but that skill's not available to your team, you're waiting. Yes.
And that is a really common theme through most of it, and that skill might not be available because it's in another team. Maybe you haven't asked for the resource, maybe you're waiting for the resource, but
So that comes back to our team structure thing. If you've got a great team structure where you've got everybody who can work on a problem end to end, you tend to get less of these waiting problems. If you don't have that, and you've got a team that's requiring resource or activity or materials from other parts of the organisation, and that has to be managed, that's when it becomes a problem, because you're waiting for people to be assigned, or you're waiting for the assigned people to become available. And it's a constant course. So, previous life, for a large retail company, I was a business project manager.
Boo.
Now, my
joking.
I know it was boo. It was I didn't want to do that job again. So it was basically a siloed mentality in the organisation.
Yes.
I was given two, what I would say, are not business critical projects. So they always ended up low down the stack. But they were the only two projects I was given as this contract project manager at this point in time, right?
Yes.
And it was a separate analysis team. Yeah. It was properly old school. Separate analysis team, separate architecture team. There was a separate dev team, one of them internal and one of them an external supplier. There was a separate test team. And because the work was small and low priority, it was literally, you basically spent your life going from team to team going, right, I've got this work request. When can you schedule it in? Oh, you can schedule it in then. Oh, it's like, okay, great. It's like, okay, it's delayed again, is it? So they would kind of push it down to the bottom of the schedule. Then I'd have to organise the timescales with every other silo. And literally soul-destroying work. Absolutely terrible.
So you're constantly waiting for teams that had more important things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been
which is probably the right decision, because there were more important things. But
it is because of the way the team was structured. I've done the same thing. I was the Scrum Master for a team that largely did the back end.
Yeah.
And to get anything done, we needed a front end team to do their bit. Well, unfortunately, the front end team was doing the flagship project for the organisation, and they were behind. So literally, we couldn't get anything done.
Yeah.
Because we would never get any front end time.
And it's not only frustrating, you're constantly getting grief for your project being late.
Yes.
It's like, well, okay, I'm trying to organise it best I can across all these teams who are putting me down to the bottom of the priority list. Thanks. Yeah. So much comes down to that team structure. It does, actually. And once you've got a team that can roll with most of the stages of the SDLC and can do most of the activities that they need, then actually the priorities are the priorities. And once they get your priority, they can attack the whole thing.
Yes.
Just not the case in lots of siloed organisations. And it's a massive waste.
Yeah.
So it's a common problem all the way throughout the SDLC. So I thought maybe we'll walk through the SDLC at the moment, and they do look different in different organisations, but generally it starts off with a request. You end up then doing some analysis, go on to some design, do some development, do some testing, do some deployment, maintain it once it's gone live.
Yes.
Right? So that's a basic SDLC.
So starting at the request.
Which
is probably some of the biggest bits of waiting you'll have to do.
Yeah, so it's amazing how many big organisations, have this huge annual planning cycle. And I guess there's several aspects of waiting there. One is, if you don't have budget for something in the year, you've got to wait till that annual planning cycle comes along to get the budget.
Yes.
Unless you can raid other budgets, which sometimes you can't do, particularly towards the end of the year because everybody spent it. So it's like, okay, so I've got to wait 3 months now for the annual planning cycle to begin. Now, this is not like a week-long activity, right? This tends to be a kind of 3 or 4 month activity where people are running around, particularly in a portfolio, but also in some of the teams trying to provide information to the portfolio about how long things can take. This is kind of a 3 or 4 month process which absorbs loads of people. And, if you've put in a request at the beginning of that cycle, you're going to have to wait 3 or 4 months even before you get an answer. That's even before somebody starts building your software, right?
Yeah.
And then you probably have to wait to be scheduled in somewhere during that financial year. So right at the start of most people's process is an absolutely terrible annual planning cycle that just causes more waits and more problems than it's worth.
Yes.
So not a good start on the SDLC.
No. But let's assume it's gone through, and you've been approved. Your stuff's going ahead.
Well, hey.
You've then got to get people to work on it.
Oh, mobilisation.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you've got a company with a project mentality, a lot of it is about mobilisation. You've got some funding. You have to now spin up a team, which can take up to about 3-4 months, depending on what you're doing.
Yes. And often, even if you have, so I've seen this quite a lot, unfortunately. Even if you've got approval for spending the money, there's your project. You'll need a second set of approval for bringing in people. And you'll be constrained on how you can do that. So you'll be waiting for specific people, maybe within your organisation already, maybe waiting for specific vendors. All sorts of different ways you can be waiting for people.
Right. So we've got our approval and we've got our people now. So we start to go into a bit of analysis. Hey,
we got the lamp on.
We're not completely in the dark.
No.
This tends to be a feature of our podcast.
It is, but I quite like it, so we'll leave it in.
I do like it.
The lights on dance.
With throwing the light in the darkness of this,
waste.
Funnily timed lighting switch on the room, but it's all good. So we've got we've got approval, we've got the go ahead, we've got our people.
Yep.
Now we start to go into analysis. Now, one of the weighting pieces, particularly associated with analysis and the design phases from architecture, is really that kind of propensity for people in traditional environments to know exactly what is needed before starting any development work.
Yes.
Getting lots of detailed requirements. I've been on, not that I was running this program, but I was on a program where they spent £14 million on analysis documentation before anything began.
Wow. That's a lot.
So one of it's funny because
but people had to wait a long time to start on that one.
Yeah, it was a crazy amount of time, and there was a 600-page business requirements document, which outlined lots of things that never got done as well. But we had to wait for all that to be done before anything got started.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, that's a bit of a waste of time.
And was it done perfectly on schedule?
No.
So even when everybody's waiting for it to be done because of your more traditional team structure, when it's not done on time, there's a whole load of extra work that has to be done because of the extra waiting.
Yeah.
To reorganise it.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, and this tends to be, it's the typical term, isn't it? Analysis paralysis. We end up in this stage where people, they feel they want, to have a deterministic approach to both what's going to be delivered and what the timescales and the cost is going to be.
Yep.
And, you can put in, there's a certain amount of work which is good to do up front, right? It's good to do a little bit to get yourself a kind of at least a picture of how many teams do I need to do this?
Yeah, get a big picture view.
Yeah,
get a high level.
Yeah, but then it's diminishing gains.
Yes,
it's like buying expensive hi-fi.
I've never done it.
I've never done it either, but I know people who do, and I think you spend a certain amount on your hi-fi gear.
Yes.
And it's like you go, oh, wow, that sounds way better. But then you go and you spend $3,000 then, all right, and you've got this really good sounding system. But then you've got these people who are spending £300,000. It's like, how much better can you get it sounding?
Yes.
And I think that's the same thing with analysis. It's like, do a certain amount so you can get the high level picture. At least know roughly how many teams you should put on it, potentially, or how big a team you should put on it. You won't get that right all the time, but
it's nice you need to get an idea.
You need to get a bit of long-term planning in terms of the resourcing, but doing anything more than that is counterproductive. Just get on with it.
Yes. Yeah, but a lot of this keeps coming back and back to team structures, and even when you're motoring and you've got an agile team, I've seen teams still waiting for analysis.
Yes.
So it might be that actually you don't have enough people or enough people prepared to do it, perhaps should I say, prepared to do the analysis and the design and the figuring out what needs to be done, and then you have your development team sitting there saying, there's no work ready.
Yeah, it's a common problem, isn't it? I think one of the unlocks I find commonly in environments is actually sorting out the analysis piece, the agile analysis and product ownership piece.
Yes.
When that's not there, the teams are always trying to deal with the fallout of poorly defined work.
Yes.
Or they're always waiting for work, or they're waiting for decisions.
Yes. All of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that leads to the busy work and everything else. And you know what? A lot of the time when I'm working with teams, I can see it immediately because all the backlog's now online.
Yeah.
You see a backlog that's not in order, and you almost immediately know, I bet that team's waiting for work, because how do they know what's coming next?
Yeah.
You know, what's ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can't see immediately what's ready, then there's probably some waiting going on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you need to do in an environment where you're having problems with getting those requirements ready, is have some sort of definition of ready. It's not the first thing you go to. The first thing you go to is usually a definition of done. But if you have having problems getting quality stories and their supporting assets to the developers, then actually you kind of need to look into a definition of ready bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely one of the unlocks, I think, to getting good flow through that life cycle is some quality analysis. So we've kind of looked at analysis, and we're going on to design now. Now, I think a lot of the problems with design, I think, are caused by the latter, which is the early design decisions affecting everything. I've seen a number of occasions where it's usually an architect making a design decision that is taken in isolation without necessarily talking to the teams who are at the coalface. And then you come on to going to get the dev done, and then you end up having to unpick that design decision because it's just unworkable on the ground. And then that causes further delays.
Yeah. Otherwise, really, a lot of what we said around the analysis bit really applies to design as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you get the design bit right, when you keep your design options open until the last responsible moment, because that's the key. Lean people often say decisions should be made at the last responsible moment, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is great. It's a great thing because, like, you know, and it's different situations. So, you know, if you're doing greenfield software development and you're building all yourself, you know, you can make a decision within the sprint about a requirement, right? But imagine if you're buying a really large software product, a crucial piece of your organization. Sometimes the last responsible moment might be 6 months before you implement it. You know, it's
well, and even deciding what technology to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. So I think, you know, go through the design phase, and then I think, you know, most of the problems I see is that kind of committing to designs early on that have to be unpicked by development later. And usually that's a breakdown in communication between architects and developers. And when you get that relationship functioning really well, I know you've probably seen situations where the architects are actually part of the team, or there's half an architect in a team, just like in a kind of product owner relationship, and it works really well having them embedded.
Yeah, it comes back and back and back to me to
teams.
teams, and you know, all the delays, all the waiting is when you don't have it and you have to go to another group.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads a little bit onto something I wanted to put in there around specialisms.
Yeah.
So some of the teams where I've seen the most waiting, even when the teams had all the skills they needed in the team, but they had individuals who were specialists.
Right.
Oh no, I don't do testing. I only do development.
Okay.
No, that's the analyst's job. I'm not going to talk to any customers.
Right.
Or no, I only do this part of the coding. I'm a back end dev only.
I never update Jira.
Yes.
That's the Scrum Master's job.
Yeah, and it leads to bottlenecks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So even within a team.
Well, that's the thing. If you can't at least be a little bit flexible and have those T-shaped skills in a team and are willing to move into other areas, the weights become more exaggerated because you can't unblock the pipeline further down.
Yes.
You know, so if you're a developer and you're not prepared to go and talk to a customer just to clarify something, and you're going to make your conduit the PO all the time to do that, there's going to be a delay. You're going to be waiting. Just go and talk to them. You know, you might learn something from the customer. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. The thing is, waiting for crucial information at development stage is one of the key things, and that's what and a lot of people, to be fair, manage this.
It's the most visible one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, if you're not using blockers on your stories at the moment and highlighting a blocker, which is usually where somebody's waiting for information from somebody, a business representative or the customer, that's the key to unlocking and actually making this stuff visible. And once you've made it visible, you have to then do something about it. We'll talk about that later and some of the stuff that we can do to kind of rectify some of these problems. Yeah.
I wrote something down as well, just for a change that wasn't team related.
Oh yeah.
And I saw this in one place I worked, where the developers weren't given suitable equipment. They were provided the same laptop as everyone else in the company. And there wasn't a recognition that actually they needed better laptops because they were doing development stuff and they needed to create virtual environments and all those clever things. Well, the accountants were patting themselves on the back that they'd saved, I think it was something like £700 a laptop based on the spec they wanted.
Yeah, I think all organisational problems come down to accountants.
Probably.
No, I don't mean to be disparaging about accountants there.
It's usually people disconnected from the problem making decisions. I think
it's people making decisions purely on a financial rather than a value basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in this particular place, we were able to demonstrate how much wait time there was while people were waiting for their computers to do their thing, and quantify it. And actually, because of where this was, and they were some expensive people working there, the new laptops paid for themselves within a month.
Yeah, I think that
easily.
It's generally waiting for builds, isn't it? And when you're waiting for a build, if you've got a slow laptop, then it's going to build slow. And this is on your, and that could apply to all your tools within the stack you're using. So if you've got a continuous integration server, you want to make sure that your builds are have a short lead time, because people waiting around, it just adds delays into the process. So tooling, it's a good shout.
Yeah, and the same for automated testing. If your basic test suite takes 4 hours to run, then people will either be waiting when they run it during the day, or will have to wait till the end of the day to run it overnight.
Yeah. Oh, good segue into testing.
Oh yes, it's almost like it was planned.
so we've kind of done some of the dev problems, and then there's the testing one. I think you've pointed out we've sort of made that leap from continuous integration and running the automated tests. If that's taking a long time, it's going to create delays. But actually, if you've got automated test suite and you've got CI, you're in a better position than a lot of organisations that are just doing manual testing cycles now, and that is a massive delay. So if you're running manual testing cycles and you're doing multiple manual testing cycles after a release has been specified for a testing stage, then you are absolutely wasting a whole load of time, and you're doing repetitive work as well. That could be automated, which is causing wait. When we kind of mentioned, didn't we, at the beginning, that all these problems, they're kind of interrelated. All the wastes are interrelated. You get this waste. There's waiting for the manual testing cycles, and basically it's just relates to the whole kind of motion inefficiency waste about being able to automate all those manual things and not repeating yourself all the time. So lots of crossover.
Oh, there is. And then the worst I've seen is when they've outsourced testing not only to another team
to another organisation.
Yeah. And then your wait times are even longer again.
Yeah.
And then that starts to introduce other problems, like I can barely remember what I did last week. So if I did something, sent it away, and it came back a month later, to try and pick it back up again. And for developers to pick up the work that they did a month prior when it's finally come back from the off-site testing.
Yeah. So that whole, and then again, you see that the wastes all interrelated again. So with the test team that is separate and in a different organisation, you get that handoff problem, which is the transportation problem, right? Because you lose the information over the boundary. I've been in that same problem where massive programs on, they had an outsourced testing team.
Yeah.
They didn't know what they're testing because everybody who was close to the requirement was within the organisation. So it's like, okay, so we have to shift all that knowledge somehow into this team that's testing.
Yes.
And the testing was, quite frankly, below par because they didn't know what the product was supposed to do.
No.
So it's
they
don't. Totally disconnected from the rest of the teams. And it's amazing how often it just goes back to the team structure, doesn't it? Again, it's the same problem.
It is, yeah. If you don't have all the skills you need in the team in the right quantities, you're going to be waiting.
Okay. Testing. Any more on testing?
I don't think so.
Should we deploy our software now?
I think we should. We waited long enough.
Let's deploy it. So, there's a couple of problems I think in this area. Often organisations will have some sort of change request process, change request board. All right. They might meet infrequently.
Yes.
And you're waiting. All right, I've got that software. I've got that bug fix ready to go. Can I release it now? Yeah, not for 2 weeks until somebody who knows nothing about your project makes a no-go decision.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's like, and they'll ask you, well, what's the risk of putting it live? Well, you might crash the system. Oh, we won't then. But it might not, and it might fix the problem that we've already...
Well, I work somewhere, this is going back a long time, where there was a physical piece of paper for a release, and you had to get it physically signed by 7 different people. If you couldn't produce all the signatories, the release board would deny your release.
Great. That sounds like a wasteful process to me.
oh, yes. And yeah, you'll be waiting for specific people. Yeah. Because they were named people. There was the head of security, then there was the person who looked after the environments, and I forget all the others, but I do remember there was 7.
And it's amazing how most of those people are probably so disconnected from the actual problem you're trying to solve. They know nothing about whether your change is going to be successful or not.
Yes.
So, yeah, those change review boards are usually pretty pointless.
Yeah. What I have seen work quite well is you still need security to approve it.
Absolutely.
That doesn't go away.
Yeah, that doesn't go away.
But you don't have to have it as something you wait for at the end. You get them involved early.
That's one of the key things with quality in Lean, isn't it? It's like you're shifting the quality checks to be inbuilt throughout the process. You're shifting it left. You're not leaving it till inspection at the end to find faults.
Yes.
Which is the problem with that process. So when you've got some good security in your DevOps pipeline and you're getting security involved with the requirement up front, you're getting them to talk to the teams throughout the process, and then you've got them bought into the whole process. You haven't got this quality assurance piece at the end where somebody's giving a rubber stamp to something they don't really understand.
Yes.
Yeah. That's deployment. I think on deployment, we've talked about change review boards and, signing meaningless pieces of paper. But the other waste that's usually there is waiting for the whole system, the whole project to be done before getting the most valuable features. So if you batch stuff up, it's just like, okay, we've got a batch of stuff. This stuff was really crucial to the business. This stuff was all right.
Yes.
But actually, we really wanted this stuff. But I
think they've shortened the timer. Either that or you've been talking a long time.
I think we've been talking a long time. Or they've shortened the timer. or we haven't been moving around as much as we usually do.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we just got to get more animated.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, waiting for your whole project, waiting for every feature to be ready before releasing it, in one sort of massive big batch.
I'm impressed. I'm going to have to get more animated too. We could do this.
Yeah, you
no,
can.
no more dark.
Yeah. So that would be key. One of the key delays, I think.
Yes.
So we want to deliver value continuously to the customer.
Yeah.
Like the first principle of the Agile Manifesto. Good.
Well, I think we've probably covered
most of that SDLC.
Yeah.
So, should we give a quick overview about what we can do about it? Because we don't like to be just problem seekers and problem raisers.
Yes.
I want to give you some strategies.
Yes.
Yay! I think we've already mentioned some as we go along. Anyway.
We have. So
that key one about blockers.
Yeah, making it visible when your work's blocked. Really easy to do. Massively easy. Just put a symbol on it. Put a Jira field, blocker, ticket. Yes. Give it a little block reason in the comments. Job done. Easy. Yep. Next one I've got on my cheat sheet is flow. Making the flow visible.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you a story. It's not IT related.
Yeah.
But it was a long time ago. We were building a system for students to report problems, and we did a value stream map to look at the flow of fixing a toilet seat in student halls. And it's an odd one because actually students, as it turns out, party quite hard, and there are hundreds and hundreds of toilet seats broken in halls. It's really common, and basically, if you got hammered and broke your toilet, you do have to pay for it.
Oh,
yes,
expensive.
But when we did the value stream map and we looked at all the approval processes that they had to step through, it really became apparent that here are all the touch points where work is actually done.
Yeah.
And here are all the waiting times.
Yeah.
And we could see how much of it was processing time versus how much was actually wait time. And absolutely that can apply to software as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing, if you do a value stream map and you look at the times each stage takes and you look at the waiting time between them, you can get those figures, can't you? So you can get the processing time over the lead time, and you can see what a percentage of that lead time is actual useful work time.
Yes. And it was about 2 months elapsed time.
To get a toilet seat.
I kid you not. Well, not just the fix, but then the billing and the stuff afterwards. Yeah, it was brilliant. Back in the days of post-it notes and brown bits of paper.
Yeah, I think paying attention to flow is a really important thing. I mean, the difference between the departments where stuff happens efficiently, which I've walked into, and the ones where they happen inefficiently, is that, and this is connected with flow, but I think in the ones where there's more efficiency, people tend to know how things get done. They've got a visual representation at least, or they know how a request goes through the stages, and they know who deals with those stages.
Yes.
Whereas in the more chaotic areas where things get done and people are waiting for stuff all the time, and which are often the ones that feel they have this very structured process, then they don't know. And actually, it's a real problem. So the great thing with the value stream map is that it lays out visually how the process happens, doesn't it? So you can see each stage.
It's all the steps in the process.
Yeah.
How long they take and how long you have to wait between them. It's not too hard.
Easy peasy, isn't it? Easy peasy. And a key thing with that aiding the flow is also, I think we might have mentioned this, it's about the work in progress through that flow, isn't it? So the key thing is you got this thing called Liddell's Law, right? And Liddell's Law, not to go too heavily into the mathematics because it's really easy anyway, it basically says the more stuff you've got in a queue, the longer it's going to take to process a request, right?
Yes.
So the more work you chuck into a system, you're going to get longer wait times. and that is the problem. So if you want to reduce waiting, do less. Just focus more people on the top priority problems.
Yes, do fewer things at once.
Yeah. What's it? Stop starting and start finishing.
Yes.
That's the quote, isn't it? And so I think limiting WIP. Now, it's interesting. So how many places have you been where they've actually enforced WIP limits on stuff? Because I've been to very few.
I'm trying to think of one now.
No, but I think that's the great thing with Scrum.
Yes.
At least you have that kind of iteration WIP limit, which says we're only going to focus on these stories in this next 2 weeks. So I think that's the beauty of Scrum, partly, is that you kind of get an enforced WIP by what you're taking into a sprint.
Yes, because there is that temptation with Kanban. You set the WIP limits, and then you completely ignore them because
I know.
You
that tends to be my experience. It's like, oh yeah, okay, but I think that's just going to happen anyway, right? So it's not like we're doing repetitive work. Everything's different, and there's quite a lot of variability. Like you think of the variability that comes in stories as they go through a sort of software development life cycle.
Yeah,
it's like the WIP limits are slightly meaningless because actually you might have several really big, chunky, complicated stories in there, or you might have several easy ones, and it's different all the time. So I think that's a problem with WIP limits. I think sometimes a bit artificial, but that's the thing I like about Scrum, in that you've kind of got that really nice WIP limit for the sprint.
Yes.
So maybe Scrum's your answer. If you find there's too much work in process, maybe using the sprint and only taking the right amount into the sprint is going to be useful to you.
Could be a solution. What else have we got on the list? Something about, we've mentioned team structures to death.
Yeah.
But we just sort of summarise it. Most of the waiting that happens is because the skills aren't available in the team. So if those skills are available in the team, there's usually a lot less waiting.
Yeah. Now, last one, I'm going to talk about authority for decision making.
Yes.
Yeah. Push it down. Push it down to the people who actually know.
Yes.
Just read General Stanley McChrystal's book, Team of Teams. He's talking about his time out in the Gulf. And he's got a story in there where he had to give the authority for airstrikes, and people would come to him and they'd kind of wake him up in the middle of the night and go, "Yeah, I need you to authorise this strike." He goes, "Do you think it's going to work?" A few other questions, and then he'd pretty much always authorise it. And then he went, "Why am I doing this? These people know more about whether it's going to work or not than me." And that's like, that's a proper meaty decision. We generally don't have to make decisions like that in software. It's not the same as my e-commerce site's going to fail if I make a wrong decision here. It's expensive and to be taken seriously, but it's not going out and putting people's lives in danger.
No, absolutely not. But
unless it's that 737 software, the one that keeps crashing because of its autopilot stuff. That's probably a pretty important decision-making authority going on with the release of that.
Yes, and if you absolutely, for whatever reason, can't delegate the decision away, move it earlier in the process.
Yeah.
So if you are responsible for security, because you're the security expert,
yep,
get involved earlier.
Or put a framework around it.
Yes.
Have some checklists that the people that you've approved, that the people who are making those decisions have to tick off.
Yes. So you've set out the process and the guidelines, and if they can show that they've met them, then they're free to release.
But asking the marketing director whether to approve a bunch of bug fixes that are going out for release tomorrow.
I've done that.
I have done that. I know exactly. We all have though, haven't we? It's just like you get all of them in the room, the IT director and marketing director for a big release. It's like, okay. And they go, well, is it going to fail? Hopefully not. Okay, go on then. That was a pointless meeting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the key thing is pushing the authority down the hierarchy of the organisation. You're going to get much more flow, less waiting.
Yes.
Okay. Any others?
No, I've even closed my book. I think that about finishes the waste of waiting.
It does. That's the waste of waiting. If you want to find more out about the waste of waiting and talk about, I just want to give some references that we've used here. So some of the references that we've used, apart from our own experiences, if you want to find out more about lean software development, there's Mary and Tom Popendiuk. I said that right. Every time. They've got this book called Implementing Lean Software Development, and they've got a few other books around the subject as well, where you can find out a lot of the principles behind lean. It's going to really annoy a load of agile people on LinkedIn now, but SAFE's quite useful around lean principles. So some of the SAFE sites quite useful, or if you want to book on it, there's SAFE Distilled. But I'd look at the website. Don't want to give Dean any more money.
Probably had enough.
Yeah. But, you know, to be serious, like if the SAFE principles are pretty good and there's some good lean concepts in there, which are worth looking at. So, yeah, if you want to find out more about that, have a look at that stuff.
Great.
Well,
thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and we're going to do another episode soon. I think inventory is our next one, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. The waste of holding too much in inventory.
Yes. Brilliant. Okay. And you won't have to wait long for it. Bye.
Bye-bye.